Okay, so before we get to installing our piston in the barrel and checking our extra engine, we do have to check and possibly set our ring end gap. And if we look at our little handy sheet that came with the piston here, as well as the factory service manual. So the Vertex sheet gives a specification of 0.15 to 0.23 millimeters per inch of bore. So ring end gap. So Vertex is 0.15 times 2.8. We're looking at 0.42 millimeters to 0.23 times 2.8 to 0.64 millimeters. Now KTM gives a specification of less than or equal to 0.4 millimeters. So they don't, you can see here, piston ring end gap 1 and 2, less than or equal to 0.4 millimeters, and that disagrees quite strongly with Vertex, who specify a minimum of 0.42, and KTM saying less than 0.4. So I'm going to go with 0.4. I feel like Vertex probably accounts for a bit more heat input, potentially quicker than KTM does, and the type of riding I do, it's not going to be a problem. So I would prefer a tighter ring gap. So actually, when you go online to look at the ring end gaps, so the package from the Vertex piston, as I showed before, specifies a minimum of 0.15 thousandths per inch, which is 0.15 millimeters, sorry, per inch, 150 microns per inch of bore, which gives you 0.42 or so millimeters. However, when you go online and look at the Vertex installation instructions, it gives you a minimum of 0.3 millimeters, which much more aligns with the KTM service manual, which says the maximum ring gap is 0.4 millimeters. So the way it specifies to check this is you take your ring and it will have an N mark on it, in this case an N. You probably can't see that little tiny N that goes up. You put it in your bore carefully, make sure it's below the surface. You then take your piston, and it says to place the ring 20 millimeters below the bore, which is about somewhere just there. It's not that critical, don't be too worried about it. So you use your piston to get that down in the bore. The idea is that it's somewhere the rings actually wear constantly. And then we're going to check with our feeler gauges. So in typical North American style, I'm mixing metric and imperial here. I have only imperial feeler gauges. So 15 thousandths feeler gauge is 0.43. So I don't really want this one to fit, and it won't. So not even thinking about fitting. So that's a 15 thousandths. Let's take a 10 thousandths. So 10 thousandths is 0.27, which will almost certainly fit. Yeah, that fits very easily. So if we take a 10 and a 6, no, sorry, a 10 and a 3, we're at 0.37. So if that doesn't fit, I've got some filing to do. I'm trying to make this so you guys can see this, but it's quite difficult. Ring, pop that in, get that down the bore, and then we're going to check the, I'm going to do the 10 and the 3 again. So they both need filing. So we're just going to take a little bit this is the type of file I'm using. I'll try and link one of these in the description. It is a Nicholson tungsten Crescent, Nicholson by Crescent tungsten points file. And this is the kind of file you want, and it's critical that you have the file perpendicular to the tangent of the ring. You don't want to file like a trapezoid at the end of the ring. So we're just going to take a little off that end. And a little off that end. Make sure you remove any burrs. The last thing you want is a burr breaking off and damaging scoring your piston. It won't score the cylinder, but it will score the piston. So clean that off. Too far. Be quite careful with these rings too, don't bend them because they can break. Is 0.4 millimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 10 thousandths feeler gauge here, and that easily goes in. So what we want is our 10 thousandths plus 2 thousandths, 12 thousandths, which should be a little over 0.3, 0.32, 0.31. So if this fits in, we're good to go. Yes, it does. So that ring is good. Let's check our other ring. This one I haven't filed at all. So this one won't even fit the 10,000. So this one definitely needs filing. So really make sure you check your ring gap and file, because if you're on a ring gap of like 0.2 millimeters, you very well could seize your piston. Catch your ring on the bore because it gets tight, then you'll ruin your cylinder and your piston, possibly your head. You're gonna have a very bad day. Again, make sure you deburr these all around. So let's check that. Let's check that 10 thousandths gauge again. We really want to be at least 11. Oh, I have a 12 thousandths feeler gauge. I didn't know I had. 0.31, perfect. And that fits. So 12 thousandths fits. And let's check 15 doesn't, but I haven't gone too far. Doesn't quite fit. I think that's 0.4. So we're somewhere around with 13 thousandths or so. That's what we want. So again, that is very important to file. Just run your finger over, make sure there's no burrs. Double check. Okay, and that's how you set your ring gap. I'm just going to show you how I measure out the X dimension here on this KTM 300, and this is the distance between the top of your cylinder surface here and the piston top, and that allows you to measure to set your squish. So KTM specifies 0 to minus 100 microns, sorry, so 0.1 millimeters. So they say the piston can be flush or slightly below. I think flush or slightly above or slightly below is fine. I just need to know what it is when I machine my cylinder head, but the actual, whether it's slightly above or not, doesn't matter. So the way I measure it is I have a dial indicator here set up in this little 3D printed mount, which bolts onto a head bolt port, and I'll put a link for this little 3D print file in the description. You can print that, download and print that off. It just has an 8mm stem pocket, and all you do is get your dial indicator onto the flat surface of the cylinder barrel, zero out your dial indicator. You can see it's 0, and you can see that it actually, if I go back and forth here, I've snugged that head bolt up fairly firm, but just enough so I can still move it, and you can see it consistently goes back to 0. So the trick to this is put your indicator on the piston, and then you want to put your bike in 5th gear, and you want to rotate your wheel backwards. So you want to come backwards from bottom, from coming up top towards dead center. If you try and go forwards, it's very, very difficult to get the piston to go up properly. So let's do that again. So we rotate. So we come up the bore. We're pushing backwards on the rear wheel in 5th gear. You can take your stator cover off and do this with a wrench too, but that's a pain on these bikes, on these 2016s. So we come up, the piston comes up to top dead center. Put a little pressure on the wheel, and you can see the indicators climbing. Just light pressure, smooth. Watch the indicator climb, and you'll see it climb, and then it'll peak. So we're coming up. So that's flush now. And anything above here is protrusion. So we're protruding 50 microns, 60, about 60 microns. It looks a bit more to you, but parallax. So let's just check our 0 maintained. 1 micron, oh, sorry, 10 microns over under. So we're flat on the actual head portion. Let's do that again. So cylinder piston down, come back up in the bore. I find this much easier than taking the stator off. So just put some pressure on. Remember, we're going backwards. You go forwards, it'll come over center and flop, and you'll never find it. So backwards, up here, so this would be from here until flush is within the KTM spec, and I'm going a little bit protrusion. So this is flush right here, and then we're protruding 50 microns, 60 microns, 70 microns, 75 microns. I'm going to check our 0 again. So they're on 0. So we're at 7, actually more like 0 is a little above 0. So 70, let's say 70 microns. So the spec is actually minus 100 to 0, and I'm above 70. That's fine. We just need to remember that when we machine our piston coming up. But yeah, that's how I do it. It's very quick. This dial indicator just bolts on. You don't have to take your stator cover off. And then we'll move on. With that measurement now done, we have 70 microns protrusion. We'll move on to machining the cylinder head to get the 120 micron squish band we want. Sorry, not 120, 1,200, so 1.2 millimeters squish band we want. That's what we're going to be aiming for in the end. So remember, make sure your base cat sits on, your cylinder is torqued down, you're in 5th gear, and you bump the cylinder backwards. I'll show you what happens when you go forwards. You'll be able to see that it's very difficult to control, which is why I say go backwards. So we're going forwards here. See that? It just flicks over center. So it's almost impossible. So remember to go backwards.